Yeah, Facebook has this thing like live producer or something. Okay, I'm gonna delete this one. It should be. Live. Okay. Yes, we're live on Facebook.
We're live.
Okay, yeah, so I can share it to your wall right now.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh no! Wait, what? Oh
Oh.
no! Wait, it says like only me. Okay, no, public. Okay, public. I think hopefully. I did before. I like
I'm
accidentally.
so glad you're navigating this instead of me because we would never figure it out.
Okay. Wait, I don't want to put it on my. I want to put it on your wall. All right. Hopefully, our viewers are patient because I tried like posting it on my wall after I'm already live on my wall, but it wouldn't let me. I want to share it to your page. Share. Share in a friend's profile. Okay.
On your page, it says, just now, can you see me? This content isn't available right now.
Oh
So,
no! Really?
I
I wonder if
think,
it's. Yeah, I think I somehow accidentally. Okay, switch the privacy. It like automatically put it on to only me to view.
oh yeah, mine was set like that.
No. Yeah, I don't know like why would you ever go live for only yourself? Like doesn't make any sense. Um so one of it says that it's like locked and then I'm like private and then I'm trying to make it public. Okay, now it has a little globe sign that it's public.
All right, let me reload. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. All right, it looks, I think you're live now.
Okay. Do we have any viewers that can comment if you can see us or if it's working? Okay,
It says,
someone liked it. Okay, yeah, Robin gave us a like, so that's a good sign. Okay,
oh
now
yeah,
we have 4 viewers. Okay, are we here? Are we good? Let me
I
see. If I can put it on your
all
wall.
right. I think we are. I'm gonna close out I shared it on my end. So it says live on Facebook on my end on the Zoom.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone. Have greetings.
And now the only thing I want to do is set it so that we're both um, featured on the screen. Okay, gallery. So now it should be both of us here. Maybe that's how they did it the other day when I saw the Facebook Live with two faces. Maybe it was already through Zoom. So come
That
on,
makes
Facebook,
sense.
get with the picture.
Right?
Okay, awesome. So welcome. Thanks for being here. How are you
Thanks for
doing?
asking me. I'm really honored, excited.
Um, Yeah. So for anyone tuning in, this is my friend Vandee Crane. And where are you coming to us live from today?
We are in Chichango country up here in Rosebud, visiting some relatives, just keeping it safe, have to quarantine when we go back, but
Mm.
yeah, so we're doing what we need to do and yeah, enjoying some laughter finally.
Yeah, that's nice to visit when you can for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so why don't you tell us like a little bit about, I guess just about yourself to start out with, a little bit of your story.
So that would take a long time. I'll just it's keep it really short. So my background, I'm a descendant of the Washashi people, which would be Osage Nation on my mother's side, and Dutch Irish on that side. And then on my father's side, Salagi, Eastern Band Cherokee, from like the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina, and French Basque on that side. And I'm not enrolled, I'm a descendant. Um, just what I know about my heritage comes from years of research and frustration of dead ends. And calling and speaking with tribal enrollment and records technicians, and just never really giving up, but being raised by my grandmother with certain beliefs that were handed down. So really holding on to those and honoring the way she raised me, despite the erasure and aspect of genocide by the US government.
Hmm. Well, thank you for
Uh,
sharing. Yeah, hopefully we can. Well, tell us about your book. You just wrote a book.
I did. So my book is it's a personal memoir. It's the beginning. It's part one in a 3-part series. The name of the book is called My Body, My Soul: One Woman's Journey to Reclaim Both. It's about my experience growing up um, as clinicians, I guess we would say at risk, dealing with uh, intergenerational trauma, dealing with the effects of um, post-traumatic stress from generations of veterans in the family, addiction, alcoholism, lack of support, uh, and really just the general lack of those things being socially acceptable to talk about. You know, we're really moving into uh, an era of truth where things aren't, you know, as covered up as they used to be. So revealing those layers that I grew up with, and my experience escaping child sex trafficking, how boarding school trauma had just kind of snowballed generation after generation and led to my experience of being trafficked as a child, and then escaping, being criminalized for that experience, overcoming homelessness, addiction, becoming a clinician, just to find out that we operate in a society created for predators by predators, where people like Jeffrey Epstein are allowed to flourish for years and years. And basically, the book outlines those experiences, my choice to become a professional whistleblower, to expose circles of trafficking, my dedication to getting Jeffrey Epstein put on the map in New Mexico, what he was doing with what agencies would call throwaway youth. And basically walking away from my career and following my heart and my dreams of helping others, but with more traditional holistic approaches, where integrating, you know, the mind, body, spirit, um, cultural appreciation, for everyone's different roots, and not just the differences in our heritages and our beliefs, but the similarities, and how we can heal by finding connection through our similarities rather than looking at our differences, which is really a colonial mentality. So I think that's the best summary I can give of the book.
Awesome. Wow. Can't wait to read it. When will it be available?
That's a really good question. We're working on a launch date right now. It just got published where it's in print. I ordered my author's copies, so I'm hoping those will be waiting on our doorstep when we get back from South Dakota, and I'll be, you know, reading that again. I had the privilege and honor of having our daughter sit with me to do the final proof, and it was just a really beautiful experience to fall asleep to her reading the hardships about my life when I was her age, and um, healing in that space in between waking and dreams, and hearing her tell my story. So that was a really beautiful experience that I got to have recently, and it, you know, just really roots into that concept of rematriation and healing the mother wounds, and, you know, not just the mother wound as colonial Western psychology presents to us, but from an indigenous perspective of children being ripped from mothers, mothers being devalued in society, the role of mothers being almost destroyed um, through abuse and addiction, and just all the layers of the trauma that our indigenous ancestors suffered, not just in Turtle Island, but around the world for generations. Um, so just undoing those layers of things with awareness, and finding ways to make practical changes in our lives that reflect that healing of that collective mother wound, and how we relate to the earth and our resources and our relationships and our relatives, and just everything in general. So um, yeah, it's been quite a journey to finally get this thing out of my head and into something tangible that I can share with the world. It's something that I've known. I started having dreams about it when I was 18 or 19 years old, not just the book, but having a center where women could heal in the mountains. And I always thought it was going to be North Carolina in my early 20s. Just I loved that area, and that's, I had a spiritual awakening in my ancestral territories when I was a teenager in drug treatment up there. So I just always visualized it being out there, but a series of interesting life experiences led me to Pueblo Apache territory, and I just kind of grew roots there. And it's just been a really amazing experience living out there among those relatives.
Awesome. Wow, that's so special. Yeah, that's so exciting. I'm looking forward to reading your book, and I can definitely see how yeah, how this vision has been something that you've carried within you for a long time. And that's why I think why I feel so drawn to it, because I have a very similar vision. Like when I've sat and asked, like, okay, what would be like the highest good that I could help create? It would be like a sanctuary space
Yeah.
for women to heal. But myself being a traveler, I'm always moving around. Like I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna find land. And then we got connected and I was able to come out and visit a couple of months back, and it's incredible. That land is so powerful. It's just, it feels very safe. And I think that's something, especially folks like in cities all over the place, you don't feel safe a lot of the time. You're always like watching your back and looking behind you, and out there, it feels so special that it's just really between, you and the land. I think
It
that
is.
that is so healing. Like as a clinician, right? We've looked at the therapies and the psychology, and like, yes, that's always helpful. But end of the day, what's healed me is time out in nature, time on the land, time in
Absolutely.
ceremony, and with people who are sharing those values. So I deeply believe in your project. So I'm really excited for you to be here and tell us a little bit
Thank
more
you.
about it. So yeah, tell us about the Rise in Love Foundation.
So the Rise in Love Foundation started out, it's evolved over the years, of course. It started out as under a different name and a bit of a different concept called the ISIS Group Foundation. ISIS connected to the Egyptian goddess Isis, not the Islamic State. And there's a story behind that, uh, why that name evolved. But so Isis was the goddess amongst the Egyptian, the only god or goddess amongst the Egyptian deities that actually came down and walked amongst the people and taught them how to make medicine and taught them how to grow crops and taught them how to live in balance, and very, very much like many of the um, tribes stories about, Earth Sky Woman or Patesawi, or all these other the beloved woman, all these women throughout indigenous history that have come amongst the people from spirit form, onto the earth, and taught us things. So I really valued that ancient imagery, and I thought it was very universal, to where anyone could really maybe not identify, but be like, okay, I could see that. And then I was giving a talk one day. I guess it was a 2013. It was maybe a month or two after my mother passed away, and I was still very, much in that grieving mode. I wasn't very connected to this physical reality at the time, and I get asked to speak at the most interesting audiences. This audience was the Christian Gun Club in southern New Mexico, and the Boy Scouts of America were going to be there, and Senator Pierce and some staffers. Just for the area, it was a very high-profile audience, but very different from the audiences I'm used to speaking in front of. So I went there, and the responses I got were quite comical, but the one that influenced the evolution of the name change was a Korean veteran had come up to me and said, "Well, it sounds like you're doing great work, but are you involved with the Islamic State?" And it was his understanding of ISIS. So I didn't want to have to just constantly explain that and then be targeted by IRS or whatever because of the name. So I just, for, you know, political reasons and I guess cultural reasons, the name evolved um, right after the time of my mom's death, because that's what I just kept having to do, was rise in love, just out of the things that I loved. And what really, I guess, started that was I had 3 traumatic brain injuries in 2008. That was the year I ended up getting sober, and those were the catalysts to my getting sober. Were those 3 back-to-back traumatic brain injuries, which, as you could imagine, are life-changing. And I basically had to let go of functioning academically, functioning period. Like I couldn't navigate. I really couldn't use my, what is it? It's your left brain that's your logical brain. I couldn't use my left brain anymore. I would find myself just in crisis over trying to get to the store. Things just did not work the way they used to work for me. And I had to really treat myself like a baby, you know, and nurture myself and reparent myself. And I, because all those other complicated ways of thinking I had to let go of, I really found myself going back to the conversations I had with my grandmother and the teachings she shared with me as a child, and those really special times. Like, I see the water behind you, and that reminds me of her taking me to our homelands, where the people of the middle waters, and she would teach me how to pray, and just remind me to always remember my roots and who we come from, and that we were special people, and we are special people, you know. And it her way of passing those things along to me, and our special way of being, we couldn't be that way like amongst the rest of the family. Her and I had to like sneak off. It was like our secret to be this way, because we were Catholic, because that's what was handed down. And I'm the first family member, or first generation, to really break that tradition of appearing to be Catholic, I guess. But she also had married an abusive, racist, non-native man, and it wasn't okay for us to embrace our culture. And she had a huge disconnect from her culture. And she had asked me, you know, because she had never gotten to attend a ceremony since our indigenous ways of praying weren't legal until 1978. She was very assimilated, you know, and very afraid of colonial consequences, and without that connection to family on the reservation, you know, there's so many layers that affect our being disconnected from our cultures. But she asked me and had me promise as a child, if you ever have an opportunity to learn to pray in our old ways, do it. Do it for you, do it for me, do it for our ancestors. And I promised her that. And the year I got sober out in New Mexico, it's probably about 6 weeks to a month after I got sober and had my last 2 traumatic brain injuries. The last night I drank, I got the call that she was in hospice, and she was calling for me to come home, and waiting for me, essentially, waiting to leave until I got there. And as I was preparing, you know, to make arrangements to fly out there, I'm sorry, I had gone to this place in New Mexico called Ojo Caliente. It's not open anymore. It's burnt down. But it's a sacred site of the Warm Springs Apache people and the Pueblo peoples. And I had gone there with just the intention of taking care of myself, because that was something that was really new to me. And I was sitting in the steam room there, and this man started talking to my partner and I, and invited us to a sweat lodge in Cuesta, New Mexico. And that's where I met a Lakota relative, and who introduced me, you know, to the Chantuluta and the Red Road. And I got to pray for my grandmother in a way. I got to pray for her journey in the way that she asked me to, in a way I promised to. So that really was very meaningful to me. And I've been going to Sweat and been sober ever since. I went and sat with her. She passed, and uh, just was able to fulfill some spiritual commitments to her. And that gave me a huge sense of purpose and meaning that I didn't have in life before. Like, it really taught me that there was a lot more to, than we've been conditioned to forget those things, and that's where the deepest meaning comes from, is those commitments to our elders and to our culture, and taking care of our elders and being with them, and really uh, just embracing what we have left. And that varies from tribe to tribe, from nation to nation, what we do have left. But that fight to keep those things alive, and to make those the priority in our lives, is just where I got started on this concept of rematriation. I didn't know a word for it. I didn't create the word. It's a worldwide concept. Women are doing this all over the country. There's definitions for rematriation that I found on the website, or that I found online in South Africa, that I posted on our website. And there's movements in Canada and all over Turtle Island and South America. So it's just a really beautiful energy and flow to be a part of. And I'm grateful that my grandmother knew it was coming, and she kind of like trained me for it, and like, as she was passing, she had a vision and told me that we would have a Native American woman be US president in our lifetime. And all of her visions were on point. And I know we're getting closer and closer to that. And I shared that with Lila June when we had the honor to sing for her when she was running for political office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So yeah, it's just really humbling to be just a speck, a microcosm in this macrocosm of feminine energy that's returning to this planet. And how it's just unfolding, not just in my life, but just being connected, with women like yourself and all these other beautiful Indigenous women that are doing so much work, that takes so much courage to undo all the things that aren't right with the world. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that especially this year more than ever, and many people 4 years ago during the No DAPL camps at Standing Rock, awakened to another level of understanding, to the continuation of colonial violence, to the continuation of patriarchy. And so I think as a lot of people are realizing, oh wow, okay, like we need to engage in this process of decolonization, of anti-patriarchy, anti-capitalism. There's a question like that's an important focus, right? To break down the structures that are not working, to break down the structures that are causing harm. And there's many people like actively out there on the front lines, fighting these extractive industries, the fracking, the oil, the destruction of forests, the pollution of water. There's like defenders and protectors out there doing that work, and that's so essential. And then I think what the other piece is, like sort of when the other shoe drops, it's what do we do instead? It's like, what is the solution? Okay, now we realize our eyes are open to like what doesn't work, what is not supportive of most people, and especially of women, of mothers, of Native peoples. And so I think that rematriation is that answer. It's
yes,
sort of like, oh, okay, we don't want to do the patriarchy and the colonization. What do we do? Rematriation. So
yeah,
I love that that's sort of like, hey, this is what we do next. And I know like we've talked about this, about how it's so important to have a place where people can come and rest and come
yes,
and do that self-care, because many activists and frontliners, many Native people, whether they choose to or not, are just on the front line by existing in the system that is built against us. And then we have a tendency to like work and work and work and just like fight and fight and fight until eventually you fall apart, right? Or
yep,
you end up, in these sort of destructive cycles of addiction, of abusive relationships,
yep,
where we're not, that's kind of a result of not having taken care of ourselves. And so
yes,
I think that your vision for this rematriation center is so essential. It's a necessary part. Like we need a place where people can come and rest and restore. I was just talking to a friend from Navajo Nation last night, and she was saying how she's had to learn like, oh, rest. Like
Yeah.
rest is also radical. Rest is
Yes.
also, part of the revolution, because in the system that exists, it's like work, 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 work until you die and never stop working. And not even for
Absolutely.
your own gain, but for, a corporation's gain or the economy as a whole. And so I think that that's what I really love about this offering that you have envisioned, because it's a place where people can come and restore and sort of put
Yes.
down their armor and like do that deep grieving that is part
Yes.
of our healing. Because as Indigenous people, we carry that grief not only from what we've experienced in this life, but from generations back when we were, people were being colonized, people were being Christianized, people
Yeah.
were, being like victims of ethnocide and genocide. And so it's like, okay, people have survived, we made it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have that permission almost, and also the logistical space and resources to just breathe.
Right. And that's a big part of that. Harmony has always been a big part of our cultures, no matter where we come from on this earth. We were all given certain ceremonies and certain knowledge, depending on where we come from, to keep this world in balance. And capitalism, colonialism, toxic patriarchy have infiltrated those ceremonies. And as we know, these ceremonies are being exploited around the world, but if we know anything about these medicines and we respect these medicines that were given to us and these instructions that were given to our ancestors, we know that these medicines and where they come from facilitate the earth to speak to us through those medicines. So if we're taking these medicines that only grow on a tiny little hectare of the world, a few acres or whatever, like diviner sage, for instance, how that got really popular in head shops, and it only grows in this tiny, tiny little part of South America and is used for a specific ceremony. But now kids are using it to get high in Minnesota or getting in car wrecks in Florida. And this was happening in the early 2000s. I don't know how popular it is anymore, but I just remember when I was managing a retail store, that being a thing, and I never really connected all of those concepts until I started going to ceremony myself. And even my relationship to ceremony has shifted. The more we know, the better we do, right? And I, over the years, have recognized that ceremonies have, not only been exploited, but weaponized against women. Women, it, in some instances, too many instances, they've become unsafe, for the women of the cultures that they come from. And, like, so how do we reclaim that? And well, we reclaim that by uplifting the women's voices from those communities. I'm very blessed at Standing Rock to have been God by Martina Looking Horse, sister to Orville Looking Horse, the 19th generation bundle keeper family. And I've just been so honored and humbled to learn so much from her and to have the opportunity to uplift her voice. And she's one of the matriarchs that we work with. She's actually on our advisory board. And she has a vision to take land that her and her family have guardianship over, and that's 7 miles south of the Sitting Bull Monument, and create another. She doesn't plan to call it a ReMatriation Center, but that's essentially what it is: a place rooted in Lakota culture, a safe place for youth and women and young men to come to learn sewing and songs and just the ways that need to be retained, the cultural preservation aspects, and creating cultures of safety where there is a deficit of safety, and creating a solution to rape culture, and which is not just supporting the women and the children, but also supporting the men and helping them remember what it is to be protective warriors, and helping the women remember how to respect themselves through tradition, because it all starts with ourselves. Nobody's going to give us the respect that we deserve until we show ourselves. And I know that's such a cliche, but it starts, and for me, it started with 3 minutes of breathing a day, just being like, okay, I'm going to gift this to myself. I'm going to give myself this time to learn to connect with my breath, to calm my nervous system, to relax, you know, because I didn't know how to relax at all. My life was survival. It was go, 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 go. And there wasn't that harmony and there wasn't that balance. But if we, excuse me, if we think about it, the most um, efficient warrior nations in all over the world, whether it be Plains Indians or Shaolin monks or the Punjabi warriors, they all have either ceremonies to support the healing of the spirit or practices, yoga, meditation to support the healing of the nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, bringing balance within ourselves. And, you know, we have these relationships as Indigenous people to elements outside of ourselves. We have those same elemental makeups within ourselves, and just learning to honor that relationship, not just outside of ourselves, but inside of ourselves, and bring that internal and external balance. It's a very important belief to many spiritual paths, but the Washashi people, my ancestors, as above, so below, as within, so without. You know, as we learn to create this harmony within ourselves and restore the harmony and relationships around us, everything will fall into that order, you know. And so starting with supporting individuals in creating that balance within themselves so that they can take that balance to their families. And then we know everything comes from the family, you know, and that's why families have been targeted for generations and generations and generations through policies and through genocide and all these different strategies to destroy the traditional family system and replace it with a nuclear colonial family system. So just as the families heal, the communities heal, and as the communities heal, the nations heal. So just instead of focusing on policy and big funding, focusing on the individual. I'm very honored to have connected with a lot of individuals from Standing Rock, and since then, whether it be men, women, medicine people, elders, you know, I've provided sessions, whether it's customized yoga stretches for pain, or I call them wellness coaching sessions to help create that balance through cultural belief and through creating space for self-care. And I'm just really humbled and honored to be connected with so many people and get to share the healing that I've experienced and I'm not even sure exactly what it is. I guess being open and just praying, and the prayers of my grandmother, you know, definitely, and the rest of my ancestors and the Lakota communities that have adopted me and just taken me in and treated me as family. There's just so many components to what has supported me in my own healing and allowed me to, you know, show up with this offering. So just returning that, giving it back. My grandmother always taught me to remember our Lakota relatives. We go way back, you know, thousands of years. And there's stories that I still haven't learned yet that my elder sisters have promised to teach me, you know, when the time's right. So yeah, it's amazing how life is lived forward, but understood backwards. And the more we learn about our cultures and our stories, the more things just make complete sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate your insight there. And I think that's so wise. I think that there are a lot of people who aren't taught by their family, who aren't taught by women in their family, things like self-care, you know, and even, you know, because of the boarding schools that like severed, you know, generation of Native people, like kill the Indian, save the man. That was their intention, was to just completely disconnect the indigenous people from their culture, from their language, from their wisdom. And that, you know, sadly has left repercussions, has left scars, you know, emotional, psychological scars in the last few generations. And so I think that this bringing that grandmother's wisdom that you still carry and sharing that with your daughter, sharing that with other young women, and having the women come together, like feel safe among each other, because there's been, I think, sort of through the feminist movement and the mainstream culture in like the 70s, it became the sort of narrative, well, if women are going to be free, then we have to take the role of the men. And we just
Right.
have to like jump into this competitive, hierarchical like structure that exists. And now we're realizing, okay, that's not the answer either, because then women end up perpetuating those same values that are detrimental to the highest good. And so I think now people are realizing, oh, you know what? Like, we as women, we operate in different ways. We relate in different ways. And like this sisterhood wounding of comparison, competition, oh, hey.
Just wanted to come say hi. I heard your voice.
Aw, yeah, over here. Yeah, so I think that that's so beautiful, just to have a space that is centered in these values of rematriation, centered in the empowerment of women and the reconnection of women to the earth, to our bodies, right? Our bodies have been so, sexualized, disconnected, shamed, assaulted, all of these things that have happened to make women like feel like we have to play small to be safe. We have to hide ourselves. We have to, depend on a man or something to protect us, when unfortunately all too often the men end up hurting us as well. And so that just shows, and again, it's often because those men themselves have learned these toxic patriarchal values, and they don't know how. They haven't been guided by grandmothers and mothers. And so I love that it's a space not exclusively for women, but focused on the women's values, and just reminding even the men how to be in that relationship, and how to manage the different grief. It's really, I think a lot of it just stems from grief and people acting out that pain on each other because they don't have another way to like work through it and transform it back into
Absolutely. Sorry, the dogs are having their conversation in the background. My partner made a good point, and my hookah mom says often, she's like, I look at our people as children, because we know that when major trauma happens in childhood, that's where we get stuck, and we may look like adults on the outside, but we're stuck spiritually, not just emotionally, but spiritually. We get stuck in these places. We get fragmented. We don't have the ceremonies and the support we used to have generations and generations and generations ago. When people would go to war, there would be ceremonies to call their spirits home, and not everybody gets that now. Now we have rampant PTSD and rampant suicide issues and cultural disconnection because of all those things. So yeah, creating that safe space and rematriation, I think of it as like reparenting. We're reparenting ourselves because our grandparents, our great grandparents, our parents didn't get the traditional nurturing that matriarchy gives because of boarding schools, because of the influence of colonialism, because of sexual abuse, because of all these other things that created this hardness and this meanness as just a means to survive, and we made it. Like you said, we made it. Now we get to celebrate that survival by loving ourselves and bringing that love and compassion back into our bloodline, back into our blood memory that hasn't been there for generations. And it's an active process. Like, I was suicidal for 13 years. I couldn't imagine living my life not being suicidal. I couldn't imagine living my life not drinking. I couldn't imagine not being homeless, not, having the self-worth issues that I had my whole life. I couldn't imagine being somebody else that I had been my entire life. And it started out with just like I said, small practices like going to ceremonies, but I needed something else because of how I was experiencing the ceremonies, and I wasn't feeling respected as a woman all the time in those ceremonies. I was feeling like a lot of men were there for ulterior motives rather than to just pray, so I was like, okay, I'm not getting what I'm needing from here completely. I'm getting something that I need, that my spirit needs, that my ancestors need from here, but I'm not completely getting what I'm needing. How can I create that? So I started having to, do cheesy affirmations. Like, the only thing I really liked about myself was my eyes. So like, instead of looking in the mirror and saying I hate myself, which was my subconscious loser, I call it a loser script, like the ways I would keep myself in the belief that I was a loser, that I didn't deserve nothing better in my life. And I would stop myself, that process of thought stopping. I don't know if that's a Buddhist thing or cognitive behavioral therapy. Everything kind of blends together these days for me, but just these little tools and just learning to use them. And even while I was a counselor, doing group sessions with domestic violence survivors, I was realizing I was in a domestic violence relationship. And, you know, I just, even as a provider, I was needing to constantly dial up my levels of awareness in my own life so I could be in integrity with what I was trying to share with my clients. And that was a process in that, just valuing integrity and taking everything that I saw wrong, that was wrong with the world, and changing it in myself, you know, and just being like, okay, we're gonna really work on this, you know. And like, so just I knew from having been a counseling client for years and having been a clinician that I needed more than what I was offered on both ends and what I could provide. And I wanted to recreate the healing that I experienced. And it was just a collage of many different things that came from praying and that came from being open to experiences and road signs from Creator. Like, I would pray for healing, and then I would pray for a way to heal my lineage. Like that first sweat I went to, I prayed for my grandmother. I prayed for a way to heal my lineage and my ancestors and all the trauma. And within 4 days of that prayer, I got lost, ended up at Northern New Mexico College in Española, New Mexico, where I said I would never go to school because it's the death by opiate capital per capita of the United States. But I got lost there, ended up across the street. There was an eagle on the sign for the college. And I was like, okay, if that's not a road sign, I don't know what is. So I'm in this panic attack. I see the eagle. I said, okay, deep breath. There's something here for you. I go to the parking lot. I go inside, and on the table of the registration table was a flyer for Kundalini yoga and meditation for addiction recovery pilot program, first time offered at the college, from a training called Super Health. That's an international training to address addiction holistically. And I went there and I said, well, I just quit drinking 6 weeks ago. I had no idea how I was going to stay sober, because I've been trying to stay sober since I was 15, going to AA, taking medications, going to counseling, all these things that just never did it for me. So I took it as an answer to my prayers, you know, those signs. I started just trying to, like I said, things had to get real simple after all those traumatic brain injuries. So it wasn't really my effort. It was just, things were very concrete, I guess. I had to like see what was in front of me and be like, oh, okay, this is a sign. I need to go this way, you know, because my brain was just constantly spinning. So I learned to depend on prayer, and I learned to depend on my grandmother's wisdom, and just things that I had always kind of questioned before. It was a big test of my faith. And that just led to learning to call back my spirit, going back to places where major trauma had happened, sometimes on accident, and just taking myself back. And that's in essence for me what ReMatriation is taking back everything that was taken from us. And I believe that we can do that, you know, and it may not always look the way we want it to, but the essence of it will happen. Our daughter, I had lost a pregnancy. I was 4.5 months pregnant in 2008. And I was in an abusive relationship, and ended up the pregnancy didn't come to term as a result of the abusive relationship. And I was completely traumatized, and that pretty much, you know, sent me off the deep end. And I prayed and sweat for years, for 7 years, that I would get my daughter back somehow. And now I have a 13-year-old daughter who's been in my life for 4 years, and we came together through ceremony, you know. So I believe that we as Indigenous people can get back everything. We have that power, especially as Indigenous women, you know, we have that connection to the earth and the moon. And the more we recognize that, the more we embrace that, the more we remember our connection to Wankanto, to Creator, to Kashala, and we just there's so much power in our prayers, and just remembering our sacredness. And so, yeah, that's what I've been seeking, just to recreate and offer for other women, so that they can give the best to themselves, and the best to their children, and the best to their families, and the best to their communities. But, you know, it all starts with us, and remembering that we deserve that, you know, and that we're capable of that, and that we are sacred no matter what's happened to us. You know, we can change our stories, we can rewrite our stories, we can reclaim what's been taken. And yeah, like you were saying, we don't have to depend on these systems that patriarchy has taught us that we have to depend on. We have the ability to do so much with so little. And we have the hearts and the compassion to convince people to turn their complaints into commitment to change, because we have such deep rooted belief systems and such deep faith in our ways, and that we know everything, comes from Mother Earth, that we don't need money to survive, that we don't need these systems. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered the question. I kind of went all over there. Sorry.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I love that idea of like of it being like like I don't know what the word is, receiving, but it's like calling back, returning, that it's like returning. It's not that like we're asking for something that we don't have. It's like, give what is mine or back. Give it back to me. Give back that empowerment. Give back that worthiness. Give back that, that ceremony, that prayer space, right? It was illegal to pray in Native ways until 1978. I just always like to share that fact because so many people don't realize that, especially when there are people out there, misusing and appropriating Native traditions. Like that is so offensive, especially when you consider that Native people themselves could not be practicing in the United States until, a couple decades ago. And so it really is, it's like, it's a sort of reparations in a way, but it's like rebalancing. That's how I think of it. Like we have been so out of balance as a society. This colonizer energy has made everything out of balance, economics, the family structure, and obviously the earth, the water. We're living in climate crisis right now and will for the foreseeable future. And so it's about restoring, maybe that's the word I was looking at, like restoring what once was already set, already balanced. Like we don't need to like, create it out of nothing. We know that existed, that has already existed and continues to exist in some Native spaces, in some parts of the world that haven't yet been colonized. Like they don't need this world. I saw a documentary about made by a mutual friend of ours. Kamiko had done some filming in the Amazon in Ecuador and was talking about how the Native people there, they studied the disease, they went and found the plants, and they're able to treat it, because they have kept that knowledge. That lineage has been intact. They know thousands of plants in the forest. And I just had this moment watching that little clip. It's in the New Yorker. I can share an article to it. But thinking about how, wow, I went to school for 20 years and not once did I learn about the plants in my area. Like it just wasn't in the curriculum, Okay, great. I got my master's degree. Don't know how to identify the plants outside this, this building. It's so bizarre. And so really like reclaiming what is our birthright, even just as any humans on this planet. That is what was natural for us to learn. Those are the wisdom we had to understand, how to relate to each other, how to coexist, how to provide for one another, not based on money or prestige or anything like that, just based on like, we need food, water, shelter. That's what we need, safety. We need to protect each other. And so I think that this is so wonderful just to create that opportunity to come together and like learn the old ways. Like it's like a remembering, like a collective remembering of what was once available to all humans, and especially Native people have held onto that knowledge, for so long. And it's still, thankfully, it's still here. Unfortunately, this pandemic is just really, I just posted an article that the impact is double the rate that this virus is impacting and taking lives of like the mainstream. It is double affecting Native people. Like you cannot make that any clearer. And so I think that it's another like, okay, we are losing elders and losing languages and losing this wisdom. So how can we preserve that? How can we teach the youth? How can we bring that back so that it continues for the next 7 generations? And so, yeah, I think that this vision for this space is so important on so many different levels. Do you want to share a little bit about how it's been functioning already? What's been happening out there at the land in New Mexico?
So we moved in back in May of 2019, May 7th, 2019. And pretty much since we moved in, since that first week or so, we've been hosting either families or individuals for different amounts of time. Like you experience, you're just coming out for a few days or a couple days. And it's nothing's very regimented, you know, there's not like schedules, but it's like these resources are here for you to receive if you'd like, you know. I've been able to get donated treatments, whether it's acupuncture or massage, and just kind of support people in the healing that they're not able to access at home. And you know, it's a place where, since there's no schedule, there's no demand, you know, like it's a place of gifting and receiving, you know, like it's not like, okay, your name's going to go on this cleaning agenda and you have to do this checklist. It's not, you know, I grew up in treatment centers and institutions for a lot of my life, and I'm used to those structure systems where it's like, okay, you learn responsibility through structure and obligation, those but this is more, I guess, traditional, like it's like a social, like it's kind of like a social obligation, I guess, where like you pitch in what you want to pitch in, you give what you can, you rest as much as you want to, you know, but still like support. And I've had women come there that are non-native that have you know, stayed for a month or so with their children just because they were in a very difficult place as mothers, and then they've gifted very generously, which has allowed us to support other families in coming, or other individuals in coming down that aren't able to afford to be there. So it's just really a place of gifting and receiving. This past summer, we did a 3 sisters garden and a medicine wheel garden. Well, I should say most of the seeds were received in traditional seed ceremonies down in Pueblo country. So we had a large variety of different Pueblo and Dene corns. Well, not a large variety, but we had a good variety. And then we had some glass gem corn, which was, I was surprised that grew successfully. It was really beautiful. And beans and squash, and then some other medicines, some washtemina, some holy basil, some nettles, stinging nettles, some comfrey. We did medicine making classes, and then we went out and did some like wild harvesting and made hair oils and prickly pear syrups, and just really enjoyed having more time with the land and having more time to harvest. And just there wasn't that pressure of like, so before COVID came, which is really devastating, but at the same time, there's gifts in it too. It's where it's like challenging us to come together, you know, and have more integrity and live more from our hearts, and be more generous and support our communities because they need that support. It's almost like this vacuum of pulling in. So it just, like, you know, we were stuck kind of in this rat race of, you know, being independent contractors, always like either going out to perform or selling jewelry or trying to, you know, find another speaking engagement or something, you know, just the hustle, the daily hustle. And right before the lockdown happened, I remember going, because it's an hour-long trip for us to get into town and an hour-long back, so the commute is wearing. I just remember throwing this little tantrum and just being like, I wish we didn't have to do this every day. I just wish that we could stay at home. And here we are, you know, and it's been really hard, you know, with the devastation of the loss, but at the same time, there's this gift I feel like we've gotten of restoring, reclaiming our space with family, learning how to be together as family again, learning how to cook together as family again, going out and harvesting food, or depending more, you know, on local sources of food, because grocery stores are sold at, like, it's really challenging our dependence on consumerism and forcing us to kind of look at these other things. I feel like, at least for us, for our family, and for the guests we bring out there. And I think the other unique part about the ReMatriation Center is I haven't personally had a TV in my home since 2001. So that's something that we do at the ReMatriation Center. We have a projector where we watch movies, but there's a limit on screens. There's a limit on technology. and the focus is on reconnecting with the land. So let's see what else. We've done some women's groups virtually. I've co-hosted some women's groups with Jenny Big Crow from Pine Ridge, where we just kind of get together and have nothing like, it's not specifically a grief group or anything like that, but there is a lot of grief. We're Indigenous, so there's a lot of that, but just where it's safe to talk about anything, and that creating safe space with women, because as you pointed out, like feminism has really kind of tainted the relationship with women. Like patriarchy gave us this option, like, okay, you guys can be feminists, you can compete with us, and try to get as much money as we get, and try to be like men, but then we're really cheating ourselves if we try to be like men, because we have so many unique gifts as women. Like even in like the yogic Vedas, it talks about women have 16 times more emotional, spiritual, and mental capacity as men. Men were gifted the physical strength, and women got the internal applications, and if we try to make ourselves as strong as men on the outside and try to push through our moon cycles and ignore the sacredness of our being, then we lose so much of the inherent power we have as women. So creating that space, even if it's not physically together because of COVID, we're creating that space through the interwebs. Just we were opening it up with sharing our personal stories of survival and success, or survival and just the success of survival. Success looks different for us. Sometimes it's just getting past that flashback, that's success, or getting past those self-defeating behaviors. Those are measures of success for us that we have to get through before we can even look successful in like the material world or whatever. But yeah, just having that space for women to share and cry, and then having connection after those circles, and just establishing relationships that we don't have in our families, like you said. And sometimes we don't get to have those really close relationships with women in our family because of the trauma. So just creating that, and then some language. We're connected with some language teachers to support Indigenous language from the center, or just apps that we can access. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else. We started the ReMatriation station recently. As you're talking about like we're losing a lot of people, we're losing a lot of knowledge. So when I was in college, I had a really amazing professor who talked a lot about getting oral histories, collecting quantitative data from elders, and she was just big on that, going around to Pueblo elders and Dene elders, and sometimes they were traditional language speakers, and she'd have to get an interpreter, but just going to the most remote parts of New Mexico and collecting stories by audio interview. And I said, wow, if that's something that our daughter and I could do together, we could do it through podcast and kind of like modernize it to where we can interview elders or other matriarchs through like Google phone or Zoom, like we're doing now, and then launch a podcast. So we started doing that. There's been families that we've been working with over the years that we made commitments to them that somehow we would find a way to elevate their stories and get their stories out there. And we thought about doing a book of collective stories of the return of matriarchy, and telling all these different stories of women and their stand for taking back and reclaiming what's ours in their communities, and capturing those stories before it's too late to capture them with some of our elders. So we launched that project this last full moon. So every full moon or solstice or equinox will have a special guest, grandmother on there. And then in between, we probably have shorter episodes where we just interview somebody who has a community project that focuses on decolonization and rematriation. And so that we're really excited about that. And then that book that we have been thinking about, asked my daughter if that's something she would be interested in doing now that she's getting a little bit older. And we're working on creating interview questions to do extended interviews for the book. So basically using the podcast to support the launch of the book in the future, and just the extended stories, and supporting documents, and just making it a forget the actual word, like a longitudinal study where we just study stories over the years and tell these stories from the lens of matriarchy.
Awesome. That's exciting. I'm looking forward to tuning in.
Yeah.
And what are some ways in which people could get involved? Like, what are some of the wish list items or visions that you have that could happen next year at the ReMatriation Center?
Well, this land that we're on, we don't actually own it. It is for sale, but due to COVID and economics and everything and the way the economy is going, it's too much of a high risk to invest in a rematriation center, because rematriation is something that sounds cool, but there's not a lot of money behind it. And I'm monetizing this isn't a goal. It's finding ways that people would like to support it in ways that they could be involved. So our vision is to essentially negotiate a deal to get this land or land similar to it in a similar area, and have a community dwelling, which we do have right now. We have a straw bale house, which functions as the community dwelling. And right now it's just limited to camping spots and your camper van, which is parked there. But like having the vision to put up teepees and a longhouse and a hogan, since the Dene relatives had their long walk through there, it was suggested to have a safe space for our Dene relatives to have a Dene builder come out and build one. So just having dwellings, we're visualizing 7 different dwellings at least, since it's 9 acres of land. And if we don't get this land, we're looking to get something comparable, maybe a little bit more land, and having a dwelling on each acre basically, and having horses out there to connect with the healing of our relatives from the horse nation, and how we've been connected to them for thousands of years, and bringing that back into being a priority for our people. And so right now we have a campaign running to support the ReMatriation Center. If somebody wants to just donate land, that would be great. Land back, it's ours anyways. It was taken through genocide and murder and death. I mean, the FBI was created out of the murder of women from our tribe, Osage Nation. So it's always been a battle about resources and fear over scarcity, but we need to get away from that fear of scarcity. And it's interesting that poverty and wealth are 2 sides of the same coin. We both have this fear. We both come from the scarcity mentality of there not being enough. And the thing is, with wealthy people, they have more than enough, but to them it's still not enough, and their addiction is more. And we have this same suffering as people that don't come from old money or generations of resources, or the generations of people that have taken resources from other people to have those resources. So there's this fear on both sides, and it's time that we heal from that fear and we have compassion for both sides. It's really hard to have compassion for billionaires, but I've watched what rich people do to themselves to maintain that wealth. It's talk about wounds, and when you ask people to support something financially, you're scratching at those wounds, you're scratching at those scabs, you're really triggering that fear about scarcity. So I guess the thing that people could do most to support this project is look at that scarcity mentality within ourselves, whether or not you come from a place of money or whether or not you come from a place of no resources. We all have the ability to make a difference in the world and to positively affect the change that we all want. We all want the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all want to have our loved ones taken care of, right? And I think maybe even billionaires, maybe they want clean water, I think they like water. I mean, I don't know a whole lot of billionaires, but I'm pretty sure they drink water too. And that they would want their grandbabies to have water too. So I think we all essentially deep down want the same things, but like healing that fear. So yeah, generosity, that's the best way to support. What can you give? What can you support with? Some people, you know, it may be in kind donations, it may be donating monetarily. We did just get an account through a nonprofit recipient. We're not a 501c3 yet. We have been grassroots for a very long time, but we just, I believe it was you that suggested giving, and they are no longer doing fiscal sponsorship, but they still have like fiscally sponsored accounts, I think is what they call it. So we're more credible than we used to be. When you donate to our Fundly account, it is now tax deductible because it goes into their account instead of our bank account, which does not have a 501c3 tax exemption attached to it yet. So your money goes into the giving account. We apply for a grant for the money for our project, and then they give us the money. So we're now a step closer to being more credible to receive your money, so that you know that it's going to something credible. Trying to think what else. You can follow the ReMatriation station just to get a better feel of what we do, who we work with, the stories of the individuals we work with, how powerful those stories are, and how they're working to change history with little to no resources, and just really actually more than just unsung heroes. Like, we go through attacks where our families are threatened, you know, our family members are murdered because of our commitment to change and the fearlessness to bring forth this new paradigm where everybody's taken care of rather than just a few that are in power that have the resources. You know, we see indigenous activists killed all the time in South America and Central America for speaking out on these same issues. So this isn't, you know, light work. So for those of us that are putting ourselves out there, sacrificing our careers, sacrificing our paychecks, sacrificing security for comfort tomorrow, for a better future for generations, you know, just question yourself, what am I doing like right now that is contributing to that, and what can I do? Like, because there's so many of us that are giving everything to do that, when we come from literally nothing. So if you do come from something, ask yourself how you can support a little bit more for those of us that put our lives on the line to do this work. And how can we support you in healing that fear? You know, like I said, the ReMatriation Center isn't just exclusively for Indigenous women. It's a safe place for Indigenous women. It's run by Indigenous women for Indigenous women, but it's also a place where anyone can come that is safe for Indigenous women. So it's not closed off to non-Native women. It's a ReMatriation retreat space for non-Native women as well, where they can gift or sponsor, you know, another woman coming out there that can't necessarily afford it. So how can we come together and share what we have, share our knowledge, share our visions for the future in a good way that releases that fear that we all have, that scarcity, that we're all conditioned to live from. You know, and I guess I'll just end with like one of the biggest inspiring things for me, even though I had a really difficult childhood and experiences, one thing that really made an impression on me, one of my friends, when I went to a Catholic school, her parents worked for Disney World for years, and they weren't rich or anything, but they had some, I guess, tenure or whatever it's called when you work somewhere for a long time. So she got passes to Disney World all the time, so I would go to Disney World with her, and her parents would take us in this big old hoopty, and it was always fun. And I would go to Epcot, and Epcot had this big globe, right? And the geodesic thing, the designer of the geodesic thing, Buckminster Fuller, or I think was his name. anyways, he had given a speech back in 1976, and he said, and his whole like Epcot Globe was based on the fact that there is enough resources for everybody to live a healthy and productive life. There is no need for hoarding resources. We have reached a place in humanity at 1976, he said this, that humanity has passed a critical threshold, and that threshold changes everything. That there we are doing so much more with so much less, and that there's just enough for everyone. There's enough for everybody to have a productive and healthy life if we stop hoarding, and that there's enough technology to be put in place to where menial labor is no longer an issue. Minimum wage is no longer an issue. There should be universal cost of living for everybody, and these things that nobody wants to do, nobody has to do, because our technology can cover it now. But there's this, I guess, a trend of corporations using technology to try to enslave humanity and shape our thinking through behavioral modification on social media and all these other things. But that if we use that technology for good, everybody can be happy and healthy. And that if we're able to just let go of trying to get more of what we don't really need, it frees up this ocean of energy to appreciate what we already have. And so many of us are living with an excess of our needs being met, and just really, learning to appreciate that gratitude of knowing what we need and appreciating what we have, because that excess, all it does is turn into waste and storage costs and eventually landfills and the destruction of environment. So yeah, I guess what was the question again? Yeah, I just wanted to share that Buckminster Fuller, that's always inspired me since I was a kid, just this idea that there's enough, and that if we just live from a place of compassion and generosity and gratitude, that we can create that reality. And his vision wasn't just something that was fairy tale or fantasy. It's the way that our ancestors lived. There was always enough for everybody, and the people that had the least were the best taken care of. And the measure of courage, or the measure of, goodness, was how much you gave, not how much you had, and everything's backwards in this world today. So I guess just taking those bits of wisdom that have been passed down to us over generations and finding ways to practically apply them in our own lives, and then saying, well, is this ReMatriation, is this a solution? And if you think it is, how can you contribute? And if it's time, or if it's a skill you envision contributing, like, I can't think of everything, inbox me, say, hey, I got this idea. Like, this is a community contribution. It's it's something that I've carried in my heart for 20 years, but it's also something that it's taking a village. I can't make this happen on my own, and it's not just directed by my own ideas. There's a team, and I couldn't be doing it without them. So yeah, if you want to be part of the team at whatever capacity, or if you have money to contribute, we will gratefully accept your money. If you have land you want to give, take that too. So however you want to contribute or be a part of the Rise and Love Foundation, we're open to ideas, we're open to contributions and connections, because it's all about connecting and sharing and gifting and receiving.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview and share your vision. I'm excited to see who tuned in, and I'll be posting some of the video interviews that we did when I was out there soon, so people can keep learning about it. And we'll put the donation link on here too.
Very cool. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Lolly. You have a blessed day. Stay safe.
You too. Take care.
Okay.